Honey, why don't you introduce us?
Well, I would certainly like to welcome everyone to the place, and we have a special name for it. And the name originated many, 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 many years ago, and then now we get to use it. It's really strange, but we like to say we're at the place, and it's the place for spiritual, scriptural, and intellectual honesty. And you say this a lot, which I really appreciate. You know, we're not there yet 100%, but we are certainly on a journey towards that. And so we want to welcome everyone to the conversation tonight. And we do have a special guest. I guess we'll bring him on in a little bit. I'm not too sure about that. But he's all the way from the Netherlands, and his name is Dennis. And we call him Schous. Actually, you pronounce his last name how?
Schous.
Schous.
Yeah, Dennis Schous.
Dennis Schous. And we've given him the nickname of Scousy, and so he's fine with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep repeating it. Actually, we would. We would actually run it in the ground if he didn't like it, but he does. So we're saying hi to Dennis, and we're going to bring him in and let everybody else meet him that hasn't met him. So welcome to the place tonight.
Tonight we're also supposed to have another guest along with Dennis, and that would be Jim Mufo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to have him on the show. Now, there may be a technical problem in bringing him in, and if I can, I'm going to send our producer. Do what? Okay, I'm going to send you a note.
Well, Mr. Mufo will not be joining us tonight, and that's a sad occasion because he is an awesome guy. We love talking with him on Facebook and messaging back and forth, and Jim has such an insight into the love of God, and he's not afraid to share it, so we really appreciate that. So tonight we are going to entertain questions, and you can contact us. I'm sure most know already at 850-572-7441. You can get your text questions in, and you can also Facebook them. You can Ustream them on the chat, or you can also email them at info@newcovenantgroup.com.
Now, we were talking before the show about a particular thing. Why don't you bring that subject up?
I will. I sure will. My husband posted something on Facebook approximately 2 hours ago, and he says, I can overwhelm my fears with love and have peace. And we would have to assume it's a quote since you put your name to it.
Right.
But you're saying that this is a translation from a particular scripture, a quasi-translation.
You know, in our English translations, we have perfect fear, or, perfect love cast out all fear. The thing that's really not dealt with in the English is the language flux of the writer. If we deal with the language flux of the writer, you're going to see something that's really emphasized. Number one, each and every one of us know what it means to have fear. This is something that we have. We have fear. And it's not saying that if you have God's love, all fear goes away. That's not what's being indicated. What's being indicated in the text is, if I have fear, I can choose to fear or to love. In other words, the idea of being kind and gentle, patient, not keeping a record of wrongs. In other words, learning not to resent people, learning not to have a grudge against someone. And the writer was convinced that once you started learning how to love, once you started learning how to love, these fears that you have will go away.
But how do we learn to love other than?
I'm not suggesting that Jesus wasn't our teacher. I'm simply saying that the responsibility of being kind is left up to you. the individual who fears. And so here I am, I have fear, and it's up to me to make the decision to be kind. It's up to me to make the decision of saying I'm going to rise above what forgiveness is, because forgiving is an attitude, or it's actually an action that says I need to get rid of my resentment, I need to get rid of my grudges, I need to get rid of that record of wrongs that I'm holding against people. And people who do have grudges, people who actually keep all of this stored inside, they are the ones who have the most fear. For instance, psychologists sometimes can't distinguish between fear and anger. It's a very difficult thing to distinguish because the symptoms are very, very closely associated, physiologically speaking. And so when a psychologist is counseling with a patient, sometimes what you have to do is to deal with both issues, both a fear issue and an anger issue. Most people, when they feel as if they are afraid, in reality they're angry. And some people who are angry may not be angry, they may be afraid. And so these are very, very close in the idea of psychology. And the way that counselors are dealing with this is they are teaching people how to love. In other words, if a person can rise above what forgiveness is, in other words, once you forgive, learn never to hold a grudge again. Develop a better mental attitude. If my attitude can be like that of Jesus, I'm not going to keep a record of wrongs. I'm not going to resent people. I'm not going to want to have vengeance on people. When people do me wrong, I'm not going to strike back. In fact, the way that I repay evil with good. And so once I start the process, the journey of repaying evil with good, being kind and patient, not keeping a record of wrongs, that's when my fear starts going away. It's not one of these instant things. And this is where Christianity has a model that's completely wrong. They are always looking for this miracle in the sky, in a sense. They're looking for magic Jesus to say, I'm going to impute my righteousness into you. I'm going to impute my love into you. And so, zap, it's all over. No more fear. Fear doesn't go away that way. Fear, for the most part, in many categories, fear is a learned behavior. And sometimes it takes as long to get rid of that behavior as it took you to learn it. And so it's like desensitizing. We have to desensitize. We have to be reconditioned or reprogrammed in a sense. And so this is what the verse is all about. It's about overwhelming your fears. In other words, it's about learning something about being kind, learning not just the book knowledge of it, but it's the experience of being kind and the results of being kind. When I'm patient, I can see the results of being patient. I can see the results of not holding a grudge. I can see the results of not resenting people. I can see the results of what love is. And when I start seeing the results of how love engages, I will lose my fears. And that's what's intended by this particular verse. And
what type of love are you really talking about?
We're not talking about, let me talk about something that a lot of people have a lot of problems with. And I think that a lot of people come our way and say, well, I have the agape love. And they think agape is this God love. That's not true. First of all, words have usage, not meaning, not inherent meaning, that is. The term agape and phileo, they can mean one and the same thing depending on usage. And so we can just as adequately say that God has this phileo, this love for us, not agape, and we would be saying the same thing as agape. We don't need to spiritualize terms. There are various other Greek terms that I won't go into now, but They would be the equivalent of what I'm talking about when it comes to the love of God. But some of these things are extremely ambiguous. For instance, when we deal with the scripture and I say in Greek, he agape theou, a direct model of translation theory would say that that is the love of God. But that's rather ambiguous, because we don't, when we say the love of God, because of the genitive, it creates an ambiguity. We don't know whether the love of God is God loves us or we love God. This is why lots of linguists are toying around with the objective and the subjective genitive to try to posture it differently. And so trying to figure out whether it's our responsibility or God's responsibility in this love connection is very difficult. That is, if we're examining a piece of literature of some ancient writer. And so I guess my point in translating this loosely was to suggest this: the idea of peace, adonai, in most of Paul's writings is to say that there is absolutely no againstness. And there's something about this idea of being against that's quite satanic. Now, don't go too far with satanic, because there is no literal Satan, there is no literal Lucifer, there is no literal devil. All of these terms in Scripture are always used metaphorically.
Well, why don't we give it a literal word that people won't misinterpret or, take it and stretch it into something mystical?
I really don't know of something that adequately grabs the idea of adonai better than the term peace, even though it's like two Olympic circles. I can say adonai in Greek, and if we can picture in our mind's eye an Olympic circle, very unique unto itself, and then we can say peace in English, another Olympic circle, and we can say that these two Olympic circles come together and they have some things in common, but not all things. That's the idea of adonai, some things in common with the idea of peace. And so when we get specific about what I mean concerning peace, to make it closer to the identical idea of adonai in Paul's writings, not every usage, but most of his usages with adonai, it simply means that I have absolutely no againstness. This is why Paul kept writing, peace. You have peace with God. What does that mean? God isn't against you. You shouldn't be against him. And sometimes he would write it in a planaric sense. Mm-hmm. It was intended for the reader to understand God is not against you, nor should you be against him. And so lots of planaric things are written by the ancients. It's something that we can't do very well in English, because the Hebrews speaking people, I should say, they had the ability in their logic system to deal with two things at the same time. And so it's not a complicated thing. They did oftentimes deal with planaric issues. They could deal with even an issue of something that's polysemious, something that had multiple meanings, and that's a very difficult thing to deal with in English. Our English language and logic system, we can't wrap our minds around that. But one of the things that they had was very much like that. This is why the doctrine of the Trinity has become such a faux pas in trying to wrestle with the idea of who Jesus is. For instance, Aristotle made the statement, and we're not convinced that Aristotle actually made this statement, but we do attribute this idea to Aristotle. And it's even questionable as to whether we need to translate it like this or not. But I'll simply state it because we use it all the time in English. It is in this, that positive A and negative A cannot be one and the same. And the doctrine of actually Christ, that is held by not all theists, but some theists, positions itself as if Jesus is 100% perfect humanity and 100% perfect deity all at the same time. And so they could claim something that was very much against Aristotelian logic. And so the Jews did have that within their logic system. And so you will find that in semantic languages, their logic system is much different than we have in, say, Greek, because Greek is not a semantic language. And so when we study, Chaldean, or when we study Aramaic or Ugaritic, or the First and Second Temple Hebrew that I've mentioned often, you're going to find, a logic system that's very peculiar to the way that we think. But they had a rhythm with it, and this is why their arguments are much different than ours. It reminds me, in a sense, of witnesses at an accident, being able to see things from multiple views at the same time. And we like that when we are doing research. Let's look at this from this angle, and then from that angle, and then another angle. And those people had the capacity to do that. And please understand that most of the people back, that is, most of the Jews, by the time that they were 5 and 6 years old, they had a tremendous command of their language. They didn't have televisions. They didn't have telephones. They would walk. Most of what they were into is they took a didactic approach mostly. But Paul talked about the peripatetic philosophers, these philosophers that would walk incessantly, all the time, that is. And they would walk and walk and walk and just talk and talk and talk. And so they had a rhythm of always educating one another all the time, always using language. And most of the people in the days of Jesus, they had a command of various languages, not just one or two or three. Most of the time up to 4 or 5. But today, the problem in America, or here in the West, is that we find very few people who have the command of one language, much less 2. And this is why the arguments that we have here in the States are somewhat failed, because we're not inclusive of all of the different styles of arguments. And this is what I'm trying to do as a translator. I'm trying to suggest that English needs to grow a bit. We need to be all-inclusive so we can think rationally in other languages. But that means that we're going to have to stretch a little bit, create better language flux in English, and leave those failed models of boxed English behind us, because they are failed. And so if we can do so, we might include some of the things that can't be stated. For instance, in Greek you have middle and passive voice, left and right, all the way through the Scripture. And this is strange to us. We don't like the passive. Even our computers today, Microsoft Word hates passive. And it's because we don't understand the passive. And this is why when I talk to students of English about equative verbs, they have a problem. Transitive verbs, are mostly understood. Intransitive verbs, people understand. Equatives, not so much. And then when I start talking about ergative verbs, that's when everyone in the English language gets lost. And it's when actually the subject becomes the patient. And this is something that needs to be included in English. And at some point it will, but it's going to be there because some linguists have struggled hard to say we need to comprehend everyone, everywhere, in what they're saying. Because, for instance, in other countries, you have other countries that are actually educating their children in the 3rd grade, and they're taking Algebra 1. And when you look at our school systems here in America, Algebra 1 isn't taken in the 3rd grade unless it's a classical school. If you go through a classical setting of education, you will receive the basics of algebra in the third grade in good classical schools. But this is just stating something poor. So back to this verse, he's simply saying that the choice is up to you. If you want to get rid of your fear, start being kind. Start learning not to resent anyone or anything. Start learning what life is about without holding something against other people. And what you're going to find yourself doing is you're going to free yourself. And so it's very much in this kind of context that a lot of these New Testament writers write. What are your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. It sounds like we can free ourselves and be independent people and, stand alone and be all we need to be. Or we can be part of a group, be part of a family, and work together. I take a small exception to the I.
Well, I is not intended to suggest that I'm the only one in the ballgame. For instance, in my relationship with you, we have a powerful relationship. But when I say I think that we made a video, some years ago, and you made the statement, when you say Dr. Jones, you're actually saying Rhonda. And when you're saying Rhonda, you're actually saying Dr. Jones. And that's so true, because you're growing me up and I'm growing you up, and we understand that. And so whatever my struggle might be in life, it's certainly true that you're there encouraging me, enabling me to actually be able to not hold a record of wrongs. How many times do you encourage me to be kind? Can you tell me?
That's a trick question.
That is a trick question. And so if I want to get rid of my blankety blank, okay, and I want to have this peace, I'm probably going to have you just really helping me out. But in that, as much as you speak to me, there's something about me, and you know this, that may just rebel and say, not right now. I don't want to grow up. I want to stay immature. And so this is where you come in. You have to not push, but you have to gently say, listen, watch me. Look how kind I am. Look how patient I am. Look how marvelous. No, I'm not mocking you. I'm simply saying this is what you have to do.
That's what should be done. That's true. I just wanted to point out that, me personally, I am totally against lone wolfing it. I don't see any purpose in it. I don't see any good in it.
I agree.
And I just want to make sure people understand that quote from you, that it's not about lone wolfing it. You will not make it that way.
It's not about being a maverick. And this is where people are failing. Do you need to leave church? Yes. But don't become a maverick. You need people. I mean, the whole idea of being patient requires people.
Exactly.
And things happening around you. You can't just go into a closet or stick your head in a hole like some bird. My point is, we simply have to, we need support groups. And we need, you and I mean, we need people to help us to move forward with the New Covenant group. We can't do it by ourselves.
Right.
And all of the people who support what we're doing gives us the ability to move forward. The same thing is true when getting rid of my own personal demons, if you will. Getting rid of my own Satans and Lucifers in my life. I need some help, but there is this thing that I must do. I've got to make a decision to be kind. I don't care how much you encourage me. I've got to commit. I've got to say, yeah, my wife is right. I need your encouragement. I need you exhorting me. I need you, being right there, helping me, walking 2 by 2.
But at the end of the day, it's up to you to apply everything that I'm trying to give to you, and it's a choice.
But it's not getting there alone. I can't say that this verse is an implication of doing it alone. I can't actually say that this is not the Christ within you working this gently. I would argue that as much as you do for me, and as much as Christ does for me, there is a struggle in moving forward. And that struggle is simplified the more that you encourage me, the more that let me use a word that we use in religion a lot, yield.
It's a good word.
Yeah,
it really is.
I like the word submit, because if I don't submit myself to you, there's a problem with me. And lots of people today, they're offended by that little term. But if you submit to someone who is kind, they're not going to hurt you. If you submit to someone who knows how to help you, it's like when Papa, when he submitted himself to one of the physicians that he went to, he was given 2 more years in life. That's a wonderful submission. And so the Bible teaches us, well, some of the authors wrote it like this: we need to learn how to submit ourselves, not like submitting to someone who is going to hurt us, but there's something about this humility thing that's good. When our children come to us, honey, how often do they come to us arrogant and proud and haughty? And how many times do they come to us really wanting to submit to our wisdom and knowledge? We've lived many years, and we don't know everything, but we know some things, and they can gain a lot of wisdom by submitting to our wisdom, and that's good. It's like good science. You need to submit to a professor, in a sense. You need to say, I'm going to open up my mind and really give my attention to this professor. It doesn't mean that I'm coming in here and I'm going to worship that individual. It simply means that I'm going to give this person an opportunity to do something for me that I can't do for myself.
Sure.
So I can't do everything for myself, and therefore I need professors. I need Bob Graves. I need Greg Bray. I need people like that in my life that can teach me and help me. And this is why I need you desperately. Lord have mercy, I need you. I can't grow up without you. And so it's that kind of thing that we need. We need relationships with people. This is how this works.
Certainly agree. We have a couple of comments already.
Are they good comments or bad?
Well,
devilish?
No, not
satanic?
devilish, not satanic. But we read the bad with the good. But these are pretty good. Bob Graves says, "Love the hat."
He likes the hat.
He does. But even better than that, Bob says, "It is so refreshing to hear a well-informed linguistic approach to the biblical text. Thanks." And while you were given that linguistic approach, I was like making their grocery list and thinking what I'm going to do tomorrow.
You were making a grocery list.
In my head.
People here need
really
to understand we do like to eat.
They know. They can tell.
How can they
I
tell?
gotta do clothes. I'm just joking. Sometimes I get worried though that you're so passionate about the linguistic piece of it, and you just go off, and you could go forever. And sometimes I get so worried, and I know Bob would never be lost in that, but I get so worried that other people might.
Let me say this about Bob.
Okay, can I say a good comment about me?
Go for it.
Stephen Furlow, he says, "I'm with you, Rhonda. I would not make it on my own." And Definitely. Stephen and Nicole are definite candidates for the knowing that it takes two people to
Right.
work together and they don't lone wolf it.
Right.
So that's great. So Bob.
I can't thank Bob enough for being a part of the New Covenant group. At some point in time, he's going to realize how special he is. He's a great linguist, but the thing that makes him greater than just being a linguist is he's extremely honest and authentic about the approach. And one of the things that I know about Bob is that he's willing to change his mind about various things if he has some kind of reason to do so. And he's a well-read person, very well-trained, very scholarly. He's a scholar in many different categories. And I'm thankful for Bob because Bob, he has the ability to speak to people in a way that really communicates to the heart and the mind. I don't have that. I make people upset, but Bob, he has this wonderful personality. He's great. He's very articulate and he can connect. I'm not like that. I love the linguistic side of what I do, but sometimes I just don't do it as well as Bob. And Bob is the one who is polished that can really push it forward. That's the thing that I love about Bob. He knows it, and plus he can push it forward. And to me, that's amazing. And we get on the phone, and we have a wonderful time going back and forth, and it's an amazing time that we have with each other. And Bob, thank you for making your comment tonight. You're so well appreciated around here, and everyone we come in contact with really, really, really loves you a lot. We certainly are enjoying your show. So you make a grocery list when I start talking about the linguistic side of things.
That's not totally true. But, I can let myself wander sometimes, but I try to rein it in. I don't know if it's because I've heard it a million times or I just lose it sometimes.
I never will forget Ruth, the old woman on your show. I like to make fun of Ruth. I mean, she's old. Lord have mercy, she's old.
But she's in better shape than we are.
She is. She will live a lot longer than us from this point forward. My point with Ruth is she was an English-only student, and then she started taking Greek classes. And when she started taking Greek classes, and we started getting into linguistics, and we started going a little bit deeper, step by step, that's when she started seeing the Bible for what it really is.
That is true.
And there's something about talking about what the Bible really is linguistically that really opens up so many doors that most theists have never ever walked through.
That's true.
And when she started saying, wow, Dr. Jones, this is unlocking so many things from me. This is making things clear. I can understand now why we can't trust these English models. There's one thing for me to say, this is meta-language. That's all it is. Most people don't even know what that means. I use it because it should be simple, but for some reason, people have difficulties with it. But I think that in time, as people hear terms, they learn. And this is part of the process. So I throw new terms at people. For instance, if I'm going to deal with a telic or an ekbactic issue, people will go, what? And so I will try to define while I'm teaching so people can start wrapping their minds around what's actually working there. And it takes time to learn new terms. But we don't I think that we've been afraid of specialty terms for too long. And let me say this for the sake of the audience. If you want two chemists to get to work quickly, if you want people in the lab at the hospital to get to work quickly so they can find out what your problem is, so they can save your life, they need specialty terms. And so you use specialty terms to get people on the same page quickly. And if they can get on the same page quick without ambiguity, they can actually render a wonderful diagnosis that will actually help you. They will educate the doctor as to what's going on with you, and it takes specialists using specialized terminology. The reason for specialized terminology, it keeps us out of the world of ambiguity. Case in point, if I said or quoted Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 from the King James Bible, and I quoted this in front of 100 people, and I asked people, what are your thoughts on grace? You would probably have 100 different renderings of that word grace.
Well, you've actually done that before.
Right. I have had so many people hear the same term, but their referential markers are different. What they tie it to, in other words, it's completely different.
You know, not only that, honey, it's their personal baggage. It's their background of theology. You know, what denomination. I mean, there's so many variables there that
Right.
cause people to skew it one way or the other. It really is.
There are those who say that language isn't arbitrary, but since we are human beings and we have this imagination, when people say X, Y, or Z, they attach it to how they feel about this or that, about how they've heard that term used in a different context. So many times when I'm teaching, I've had so many people say, oh, that blessed me. And I'm the kind of person that will say, or will ask, how did it bless you? And it seems like a lot of times people are just reading into what I'm saying only to get their own blessing. I'm not putting down people. I'm just simply
Sure.
saying that people will take what I say and, oh, it's wonderful. I've never heard this before. But they're reading stuff into it. They're taking their experiences, the way that they've heard different terms that I say, and they're just reading things into it. And that's the way that language is. Language isn't perfect. It's not inerrant. It's not infallible. And this is why we need to look at the Bible for what it is. It's in a language written by people. Nothing about it is infallible. Nothing about it is inerrant. It has so many problems, and when we get honest about that, we can start treating it for what it really is.
And that
so-
was your point with Ruth, whenever you started one of the first Greek classes. And I was so worried at first. I thought, well, you know, I'm not sure she'll be able to pick up on it. And she really started surpassing, you know, a lot of people in the class. And then I got to thinking, you know, I'm not going to let Ruth pass me up. So I started studying harder and harder and refreshing myself.
You know,
But it did. It opened her mind to possibilities that, you know, it's not right in its present form. And I need to think about it. And I need to delve deeper than just the English, you know, text. So I was fascinated with her performance in the first Greek class.
The thing that I liked about that class, as opposed to all the other Greek and Hebrew classes that I've taught throughout the decades, was that we had no scope and sequence. We could take our time. And after the first of the year, I hope to have one program that's just given to language, the study of the ancient languages, so people can understand, number one, how language works. Number two, some things are just impossible. We will never understand everything A to Z when it comes to all of those documents. Not possible. And the quicker that we admit to that and can see why that's true, it's going to give us some relief, some peace, if you will. And I'm hoping that as we gain some ground, we can start talking to each other in terms that will make life a little bit more meaningful. And I think this is happening, and this is why I'm so thankful. We're so thankful that so many people have come our way to actually participate in various shows. But hopefully I've answered somewhat of the question that we were talking about. Let me turn my iPad back on. About I can overwhelm my fears with love and have peace. And so it's not so much just the personal journey, but it's all about who I'm connected to, who's really supporting me. So many people are out there tonight. They have no peace. They don't, they're unsettled. They feel like God is against them. And they need a support group. They need some people who will, in a sense, minister to them. Maybe a better term might be educate them in a very loving and a kind way. And they need to realize that their fears can go away. It may take methods of desensitization. This is why we were going to deal with phobias the other night, and we got distracted with another show that we had to jump into. But if you're going to get past phobias, you're going to have to deal with fallacious beliefs. Dealing with phobias is very much like dealing with religion. You're dealing with fallacious beliefs. And the only way that you can get past a phobia or a religion is to get rid of your fallacious beliefs. And you've got to go through desensitization because people become sensitized. And when people become sensitized, their level of sensitivity will drive them crazy. They will have panic attacks. They will have all kinds of things that are very uncomfortable. This is why I'm convinced that Jesus was so wise when he stated, you guys really need a comforter. Who's he speaking to? He's speaking to religious people, people so sensitive, people so sensitized, people who are so afraid. They needed someone who would simply comfort them. And so they had to go through desensitization techniques if Jesus was speaking efficiently to some of the people that we've read here in the scripture. Do we have another comment?
No, I was worried about Dennis. I don't know how many beers he's going to drink before he gets on the show.
He may be asleep. Let's go ahead and talk to Dennis. Let's bring Dennis on right now.
Lisa Graves, she says, you are doing an awesome job, Dr. Jones. We love you. And she also says that she's talking to me. She said, there's some inspirational honesty. Honest to a fault, Lisa, sometimes. Thank you for the comment, though.
Yeah. When we were talking with Bob and Lisa the other day, it was wonderful.
Oh, we had a blast.
She has some powerful things to say.
I know.
And when she gets on your show, she probably needs to come on this show so we can talk and just, her and Bob can come on and we can listen because they are so filled full of energy, information, and the thing that I like about the two, they're not going to share anything that's bad. It's all good.
I know, and I thought she was going to be really shy, when we Skyped both of them. And I think Lisa and I, overwhelmed the conversation, and we, you guys couldn't even get a word in edgewise, and that's very unusual for you and Bob not to be able to get a word in. But she was awesome. I had just the pleasure to meet her on Skype, and girl, we really need you talking on the show and coming. Her and Bob both need to be
see, that's
there.
my point. My point is Bob would not be as great as he is without Lisa.
Agreed. I mean, Daryl would not be as great as he is without Tina.
But you'd have to admit Joey would be a lot better off without Monica.
No.
I'm joking.
No. That's true.
Joey wouldn't be anything without Monica. I mean, Monica is his life.
Uh,
Oh,
Absolutely.
Matthew wouldn't be anything without Taco. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Let's bring Dennis on the show. Dennis,
Dennis.
how are we doing, Mr. Schous?
Oh, I'm doing great. Just chilling, relaxing.
Now, we want to talk to you tonight, and we want you to really open up a little bit. Now, we've had many conversations, and one of the things that I'm so proud of is simply to know you. My wife and I, we feel so much love for you, and you are an awesome individual, and you need to know that. And we could have a praise meeting and say, oh, praise Dennis, because he's so great, magnificent, and wonderful. And I mean that in a very respectful way, because we love you. You're a young man who is extremely honest, and you actually left church simply to follow Christ in a better way. And I would like for you to share some of that experience. Would you?
Yeah, I will. Well, it was, let me think. I think I'm left church now for a half year right now. I think it's so long ago that I went to church, maybe long, but I don't know. But the things I went through was when I was really young, I met some guy and told me first about Jesus, and really fast I came into traditional Christianity with believing in Jesus or burn and all those nonsense. And the thing what it did to me, for a long time I believed it. It was always okay for me until I met some day that I woke up in the night with so lots of fear about wrong thoughts about the Holy Spirit, and I was afraid that I blasphemed it, and I was afraid of hell and all this stuff, and I get paranoia. Seriously, I went through such deep fears. For me, it was like, oh no, I'm doomed forever. It's no hope, and I feel guilty as hell. I want to say it that way. And then I left church for a while, and I was going out. I do things, nothing with God anymore. I was just going. I was walking away from the God thing to not get the feeling of guilt, because when I thought of God, it was directly a bad thought or something. I don't want it, but it was so pressing on me, and I was so fear for me that I had something like I do go like Christianity says, or just says, well, you're living worldly life, you know. And I was doing that because for me it gives me some comfort. I was running, I was searching for hope and sort of way. And later on, I was looking on the internet. I think that wait a minute. I was telling about let me think. I went back to church. I get back to my local church. A few months later, I get baptized in the water and all this stuff. I was trying really to do my best for God again, because my fear was a little bit lower. So I think, let's do it again. Let's try it again. But things goes on, and it was like with the youth group every week, and it was okay. It was not a thing, but yeah. Then came the day that I think I found a video of Dr. Jones. Now, first of all, I came into the grace teachings, so I get a little bit freer and freer. That was me all. So I released the grace things, the finished work of Christ, you know. And then, what I just said, I made some video of Jones, and first I really doubted. I was really thinking, oh, this is a false teaching. This can't be true, you know. All this stuff was so long raised in church that I couldn't grasp it that day. Now luckily I can, but then it was really difficult for me to how do you say it? To get it, to understand, to believe it actually. And and finally I sent a few emails to the new governance group, and finally I get some message from Joey back, and then we start Skyping, and that was the beginning of my unchurching period. And to you guys also, I want to say I'm really thankful for you and for John also, of course, the Skype meeting he has with me, the patience he has for me with this. And yeah, and now I'm totally changed. I'm still going out, but now not to run away, but just have fun with friends. I'm doing my things. I leave local church. I'm not anti the persons who are sitting there. I don't hate them. That's not the deal. Don't agree with the doctrine anymore. That's why I leave church, and that's why I leave totally Christianity, and I don't call myself literally a Christian anymore. But just I'm okay. I'm just a child of God. That's for me. That's for me good. You know that all those terms I leave it because it's all putting people in boxes. You're this. You're this. You're this. You're this. You know, and I discovered for a few months now that I talked to other people and I heard their thoughts. And the lovely thing is, since I don't believe in hell anymore and just preach that it doesn't even exist, things became very comfortable around other people also. They just talk a lot more and share thoughts. Even if they're antichrist, I don't care. I just listen to their story. Because, you know, even those people are children of God, even if they have different opinions, it doesn't matter anymore. But when I was in church, no. When you were some other than my Jesus, you know, you were bad. That was then, you know. And I'm glad that I got rid of that stuff. That was my period leaving church, and now I'm still growing and learning and watching the things that Jones posts on his Facebook a lot, and of course other people, but most times Jones. But yeah, that's just me a relief, and now I'm so sort of convinced of this that I think, well, this is good. This is something different. I had a lot of teachers in my life, but this is really different, and I can say that at the bottom of my heart because this is one of the first one like that probably, and just say that we are good enough. The things like there is no hell, and I especially come back to that a lot. Maybe I said it a lot again, but I think that a lot of people need to hear this because the main thing of Christianity is still built around belief in the blood or burn, you know, and that stuff, and believe in my Jesus and all those things and that gives people the present feeling. So I have to believe in your Jesus or I'll burn forever. I don't want to know one. You know, that's what you get, and people can really live your life. So that was my journey through.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to do me a favor, Dennis.
Okay.
I think that we have lots of your friends watching right now.
I hope. It's midnight here, I think they are sleeping, so I'm glad that they record this.
Right. This is being recorded. People will watch. Not all people from your part of the world speak English adequately. I would like for you to restate some of what you just stated in your native tongue, that is Dutch.
Okay.
You're from the Netherlands, and I mean, we have a lot of respect for you. I mean, you've come a long way. And I remember when I first met you, and you're so much more relaxed now, and it's wonderful, and you're maturing so much, and we're so thankful for, you know, the journey that you're on. It's powerful, and you're becoming a very objective person, one who is interested in looking at evidence, and yet at the same time, you do realize that in life you do have these subjective experiences, and you have to be honest about that, and you are. And so, could you restate some of what you stated for our audience, that is in your language, Dutch? I'm not going to be able to stay with you in that language.
I don't think so. You would like to me what I just said about my unchurching period, and then in Dutch?
Right. Just go ahead and state it in Dutch, what you just stated earlier.
Oké, nou, wat ik dus vertelde was eigenlijk eerst in het Engels voor jullie kijkers die dus niet Engels spreken. Ik legde net uit in de periode waar ik de kerk verlaten heb. Ik ben heel lang door angst heen gegaan, heel diep ook van hel en zo. Ik ben eigenlijk opgegroeid met het idee dat als je niet gelooft, dat je dan altijd brandt en dat soort dingen. En ik heb nagedacht, als God echt liefde is, dan... En liefde houdt gewoon zonde bij. Liefde rekent het kwaad niet aan. Het is... dan moet ik zich afvragen, klopt dat dan nog wel? Ik denk dat als je eerlijk naar gewoon kijkt wat we tegenwoordig hebben, het is allemaal zo gebaseerd op wie het gelooft, die gaat naar de hel en dat soort dingen. En dat is geen liefde, dat is gewoon eigenlijk zodat mensen misbruiken. Het is gewoon iets wat mensen, ja, zeggen dat. Religie is ook iets waar mensen mee opgekomen zijn. En dat is dan just. Het is gewoon menselijk gemaakt. En ik wil gewoon tegen je zeggen, of je nou wel of niet gelooft, het maakt niet uit. Je bent goed genoeg. Je bent gewoon nog geliefd. Je bent gewoon oké, het is goed zo. Je mag gewoon komen met je eigen mening, met je eigen overtuiging. Het maakt niet uit. Ik denk dat het gewoon best is te stoppen met haat en eigenlijk samen te gaan denken. En vooruit te gaan. En dat is het. Ik denk dat het beter is dan zeggen van ik heb altijd de absolute waarheid. Want ik denk niemand heeft de absolute waarheid. We hebben elkaar samen nodig. En ik denk, het laatste wat ik net zeggen wou was, de reden dat ik dus de kerk verlaten heb uiteindelijk is gewoon voor mij geweest van, ik wil verder, ik wil ook gewoon mezelf gaan denken. En alles waar eigenlijk nu bankratterij gepreekt wordt of zo, dat hoeft voor mij niet meer. En ik heb zoiets van, ik vind het goed zo. En zoals jullie weten ben ik veel met de nieuwe government groep bezig. Hier op Facebook. En ik hoop dat... ik post nog veel, ik weet het. Maar ik hoop dat jullie er ook wat aan hebben. Als je zelf geïnteresseerd bent, hoeft niet. Maar ja, that's what I want to say.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful. I have no clue as to a lot of what you just said. I'm just trusting you here. But I guess the point that we want to stress, and I'm talking about to everyone, we want to stress that people can move forward without condemnation. They can move forward understanding God's love is unconditional. His acceptance is unconditional. And I would like to tell everyone that God actually is willing to trust us. And this is important because we need to feel like someone trusts us. We may fail, but God will not hold that against us. He's going to put his faith or his trust in us. He's confident that his children can move forward. He's confident that that his children are good enough for him. They're good enough to be loved. They're good enough to be protected. And they're not just good enough. They are awesome children. And that's the way that God looks at us. And I wish that everyone could see where I came from. I came from a theology of worshiping God. I was afraid of God. I thought that if I didn't have all of my sins confessed, I would die and go to hell. I was so insecure. And then one day, I lost that theology. I lost my faith in that kind of God. And there was something that took place in my life, and I could feel so loved. And now when I look at God, I don't look at him as the Almighty. I don't look at him as a judge. I look at God as someone who is so kind, so peaceful, so gentle, so tender. And when I make a mistake, he's just going to whisper to me. He's not going to holler at me. He's not going to condemn me. And that is meaningful. And so I can say with confidence that God acts like my wife.
Oh, no. Don't put that on me.
Oh, yes.
I wish.
You're that way.
I wish. I want to be that way. And I think that is the way to be. But I do believe we should strive for that. And I'm not there yet. But I'm like God. I think you deserve that. I think that's what you deserve in your life. And so,
See, I agree with you. I think that Dennis deserves for God to be kind to him,
sure.
because that's the way that God looks at his children. He says, you're my created child. You deserve my kindness. You deserve my patience. It's not like this theological grace that says, oh, I don't deserve it, but I get it anyway.
Right.
It's not like that at all. And, I used to believe that if I got anything from God, it wasn't because I deserved it. It was because I didn't deserve it. And it was only because my big brother, Jesus, took care of all of it. And I'm so thankful that I got relieved of that theology. And I left it and walked away from it. I could not have walked completely away from it without leaving church, because the church keeps pounding and pounding and pounding a bias. And I wanted to experience what it felt like to be completely honest. And I could not stay within the four walls of the structure of what the church had to offer and become honest.
Right.
I had to leave. I had to say, I would like to question everything, including God himself. And I find that I can question God, and he's not afraid of me questioning him, and he doesn't want me to fear him while I question him.
True.
He wants me to just be genuine as being his child.
Absolutely. Something that Dennis said really resonated with me. He said that, when he went back to church after he left, and for whatever reason he went back, maybe he thought he would die and go to hell, or he just wanted to try it again, and get closer. He couldn't tolerate it because, we've gone to different denominations and churches and meeting places, and it is so hard for me to sit there and listen to something that is very judgmental toward people and very this and that and that. It's hard to stomach it now, and I'm sure, Dennis, you felt the same way when you went back, even though you hadn't really come into a lot of positive information at the time. If you were to go back now, you would just, what's the point?
I think I was sitting there with all respect, but I have something like, I'm wasting my time this Sunday morning.
Right.
It's what you just said about when I came back. I'm in an evangelical church, evangelized church, something like that, if you call it that way. And it's there. It's never just judgmental, so long you believe in Jesus. That theology. And but I get a lot of things over me, and I keep coming because it wasn't feel sometimes. Of course, I had good times there, but sometimes it's duty because Christians go to church, and I don't doing this, I don't listen to that music. I was getting rid of movies. All those fanatic stuff religion told me, and it had robbed me really the joy of life. And it's been for me a few years that I take what I've done, but that's okay. I'm still young, so let's move forward. But the thing is, you said the same thing. When I said to my daddy also, I said every church and every place where they're teaching hell, I've been out of there. Bye bye. Directly, I have no discussion at all, because then I know enough not to just judge them directly. Of course, they have the right to say their points, but most time we came back to the same theology about believing in Christ or else.
Sure.
Because of the set, like Jones calls it always, the meta language of the canons we have today, for translations, and and that's what I compliment also to you, Dr. Jones, that you try to challenge the canon we have today. We know a lot of people do this, not because, of course, they're not translated, but most people don't do this because, well, it's the holy word of God. So that's, and then they're afraid, and no, don't change this. This is totally inspired. Yeah, sure.
Dennis, what are you, 22 years old? You remind me of a zealous, I want to say, I don't want to say Peter, but I'm trying to, apply you to somebody that's in our, English text, but like you're just this go-getter and you're on fire. I'm not going to say you would deny Jesus or anything, but, you might cut somebody's ear off if things, went from bad to worse. But my whole point is you're very zealous, and you have a mission, and that's to tell everybody you see about the love of God and that there is no hell. There's no need for a blood sacrifice. That's amazing. You are a missionary. You are a
Yes.
missionary, and I applaud you for that.
Yesterday, I had a date with the girl I told you about.
Oh, the real
Ju-
beautiful one.
Yeah, Julia.
Yeah.
And tomorrow she's coming to my hometown. I'm looking really forward.
Oh.
At night,
Nice.
I don't go to sleep, I think. But she said also to me, she is more. She don't call God God, but more like the Gospels, like the universe. And she believes also, but she don't call it Jesus, but she's more like the meditation on if you focus on smile, that's a form of meditation. And she told me things like that, and I really loved it. It was really peaceful and. But she says something like the same thing, like the mission. She says she believes also about me and herself that we are called to light up people. She calls light and love, and then she's also the unconditional love. She has some on her Facebook. She says also that by her faith it says universal love, and I think wow, it's a dream call. She's thinking like me. She doesn't call Jesus, but she calls just cosmos and all those energy. But that's okay for me. I think. You're good enough. I love you. I like you. Seriously, you. And that was really cool. And it's the same thing. She said it yesterday also to me. So I remember what you just said, like mission. I don't make it. The only thing when I woke up, now I'm going on the street. No, I just let it flow like love flows. It's not like a river, maybe if you can call it that way. I don't push it, but when it comes to the people and when I try to explain them about that God looks different to us than we look to each other. Like John said in one of his teaching, God doesn't hold grudges.
Sure.
And that's why the dogma of forgiveness is nonsense. And that's I discovered that a lot of in my world where I live, a lot of people don't grasp. They say, yeah, no, when somebody is murdered, when somebody murdered someone, he needs to be punished. I said, yeah, mate, I explained him later, and I agree with him. When they're hurt, yeah, they go to jail, okay. But God doesn't judge them. God is not about throwing them in such hell. That's not going to happen. And a lot of people doesn't grasp that. And I think what we do, it's the belief system and theology that we place on love, because God is love. We place it on love, and that's why it creates some not literally, but some a wall between love and reality. I heard something Joseph talking about the fear, and what I want to say about that was, I think fear comes also from the wall that they have around them, and the wall creates some ego, like, well, I do mean to you, so don't come to me. I'm not nice to you. I'm literally rude, so that acting like, well, look at me, I'm really tough, huh? And that's all a mask or a wall. How do you say it? Because most time those people are hurt, and that's the point. When the other opinion, like if people do that to me, sometimes of course I get sometimes irritated. Also, I also that's feelings, but it's a learning process also for me to say, okay, you're not now angry at me. I can choose to be angry at you, or I can choose to be patient and say, what's your problem? In a way, but in a friendly way that they see, because it has some effect to people. If you don't strike back, they say, what's wrong with you? Think direct, you are driven, and I get a lot of times some names, dance freak and all this stuff, but I don't care. But that's because I think different, and I like to be different. I'm proud of it in the way that let me be strange. I not be the popular guy, but just
Very good. That's
Now,
very admirable for a 22-year-old.
We have several messages that have come in. Number one, Monica, Joey's wife, wanted to let us know, and I guess it was after that comment I made about Mo. She said, I'm watching. So I need to beware.
Yes, you do.
And also Stephen Michael Furlow and also Nicole are saying to Dennis, awesome stuff.
Thank you.
Awesome testimony.
And then this last comment reminds me very much of Bob, one of Bob's latest teachings on backmasking, and he was talking about Bob Larson, I think it was, who did a large series on how it was all satanic, and they.
That was back in the 70s, I think. Remember, everybody would say, like, for instance, I don't know, Alice Cooper or whoever.
It was actually Led Zeppelin they were getting on.
So, yeah, but they attributed it to different people. But, yes, you're absolutely correct about playing the record backwards, and they would give this
Stairway to Heaven was very satanic
message. And whenever you were giving your testimony, you know,
in Dutch.
In Dutch, someone said, "Somebody's playing Dennis backwards." That's satanic.
That was funny.
That was a joke. I hope you got that.
Yeah, I know. Okay. I don't
Okay.
believe Satan, so that's okay.
Okay.
So that's yeah. But, okay.
Yeah, you don't mind.
No, it's the same thing. Like you know, the thing is, the same thing. The old people, the people from the past, the Dark Ages church came up with such creature like Satan and demons. I heard people who experienced, they claim that they have bad experience and they call it demons. And when it comes to experience, I'm really different. How do you say this? Very careful how I say this, because I don't want to sort of way. I don't want to rush to like, bam, say it doesn't exist. I don't believe it. I when it comes to me, I say yes, it doesn't exist, and even don't as follows. But for some people, some people have very how do you say it? Unexplainable experience, and then I think, I cannot explain it either. And they claim to be that there is something evil with them, but I don't. And that's not the point. That we don't even. First of all, we can be sure that there is no hell. That's the good thing. So the rest will be okay also. And, when it comes to things, I think that people are stuck, and there is a lot of space to get rid of all the theology we have. Even the new government group as nobody has the absolute truth, and I think it's wise to don't decide that, because absolute truth is the same thing like, there's just one person or one thing that is absolutely everything right and the rest everything wrong. Then you create such thing like, I am here and you guys are here, and because I know more than you have to kneel before me, and that's exactly what the theology of now, like church, tells you to place God there and not the Father. Yeah, they say about the Father, but when it comes to the theology, it's like, well, never forget he's righteous and blah 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 and judgmental and all the stuff, because he's also a just God. No, Paul's very clearly he's love and nothing more and nothing less, and it's such simple that mankind has made it very difficult for himself, and that's for me also a learning point. Of course, I didn't know that before, but.
Yes.
I just want to share with the viewers. I hope that.
Well, actually, you have made quite an impact on our viewers. Tina says, she's from the New Covenant group in Texas. She says, "We love Dennis and his testimony, and it's great to see him. Thanks for staying up and sharing with us, Dennis." So what is it? What is it there about? What is it? 3:00 in the morning or something like that?
It's 4:20 in the morning.
4:20 in the morning.
Almost. The morning is almost. No, it's not true. 6 o'clock it's morning officially. So, but not long anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what. When your girl comes into town, you're gonna have these bags under your eyes, so you might need to get.
I tell you, the day that I go to her Saturday, I was Friday all night up, and I was still so full energy and like So I think.
Wow.
That's I'm so full of energy. So I think sometimes to myself, what did I do that I so much energy to keep up all that? There was sometimes I really doubt that I was thinking, I'm still not tired. Did somebody put something in my glass last night in the pub or something like that? That was not the case. It's just kidding. But
Can you imagine being 22 again with all that energy?
My lands. Dennis, we have talked, and you told us that you are going to come to the States to see us.
yes.
When is that going to take place?
Well, my plan was to do it next year in 2013, but I don't think that I have to set it out, make it later, because I told you about what
Sure.
was
Right,
happening,
right.
just
Sure.
came in, so I have to play that off first before I could do bigger stuff. And yeah, for me, it's payable. I've checked it out. It's in the winter month, November. I thought it was €600 for me to go to you and back. So it's just one ticket of that. So that's the thing. But when I come to summer, I'm directly about €1,000, and that's a lot. So that's why I choose to come in the winter season. That's I think better for me. If it's okay with you guys, it was. But yeah, I've not directly right now a date when I want to do, but I'm sure I want to do in the future. I want to come to you guys,
Right.
stay with you for a while, and sharing and make fun. We see
Yes.
what happens, but I love to go there.
Have a good time
Yes.
together.
Oh, we have another comment from Matt. He said, Daniel Scrawls, you are the best.
Thank you. I mean, this is me, right?
That is you.
Yeah, okay. I get different names for you guys there, so I ask carefully.
Yeah, on Matt and Joey's show, they call them different names sometimes just to poke fun at them, and I hope Dennis in the Netherlands can understand that. They do know your name, child.
To be honest, I was thinking, David? Who's that? You know?
Yeah, they're just being funny.
Yeah, that's the job. But, yeah.
I was asked to make some comments, or actually restate some comments that I'd made recently. And so I wrote them down, and I would like to address some of these now. And Dennis, I want you to stay, not just for a couple of more minutes, but why don't you stay with us throughout the rest of the show? I made this comment several days ago. I stated, I no longer look at God as one who has to be pleased by my faith or the work of his Son. It troubled me for years to portray him as being so pagan. The words of Christ describe God as humility, love, and acceptance. So if these character traits are meaningful to you, you might have the kind of theology that makes sense to you and Jesus. And I think that in the church, there is this tendency to make God one who only gets pleased by your faith. And I got to thinking about that, and I put it into the context of our children. If I'm only pleased with our kids because they trust me, what does that suggest about me as a parent? And lots of people hate for me to make an analogy that is between my parenting skills or the way that I think as a parent and God. But if we are to be honest about the Scripture, these writers are writing about a God who chooses to speak in anthropomorphisms. He's not speaking above us. He's speaking in terms that we can relate to. And so why can't we, as human beings, relate to God in a human level? And I think that Jim Palmer was right. I think sometimes we try to make, the divine and the human, so far apart. And the best thing to do is to erase that line and put the divine and the human being together, so we can see that God is not out there. He's within us all. Mm-hmm. And to me, that makes sense. And when it comes to pleasing God, by faith, that is one thing. But I had to take a step years ago and make the decision from a linguistic standpoint. I don't see any evidence of Jesus attempting to please the Father. Now that may come as a shock to most people, but if Jesus is attempting to do the will of the Father or attempting to please his Father, something really doesn't make sense. Because a good father is not one who is looking for his son to please him, but a good father is wanting his son actually to do what he does best. Every one of us are unique. And I think this really says a lot, namely about John 3:16, and I think this is a very misunderstood passage. For God so loved the world. The first part of that verse is so mistranslated. God did not say, for God so loved the world. That verse should be rendered in this sense. God loved us in this manner. What manner? He loved us this way. He loved us in this sense, that he sent his son. And so when we read it from the Greek text, we get the idea that God loved us in a particular way, and the way that he loved us was simply by sending his son, not to become a sacrifice, but to teach us that we are good enough for him and that we are loved by him unconditionally, accepted by him unconditionally. And this changed my world when I started seeing that. And it's so simple. It's not complicated. And so I would like to read another one. The mere idea of becoming legally made righteous before God sickens me. Sometimes I have to hesitate after I make statements like this, because I remember a day and time in which I actually felt like I had to get right with God. It was at the age of 6. Now, I got saved, according to church definition, at the age of 4. At the age of 6, I've told you, honey, this story over and over again. But it's so incredibly true in my life as to what took place, because I was raised to say that I can't touch anything unclean. And at the age of 6 years old, I was outside of my grandfather's church, and I was picking up trash, and I picked up a beer can, and beer was spilling out of that can on my hand. I was 6 years old. And I felt like I had sinned against God. I felt like something unclean had been spilled all over my hands. And I ran to the corner of the church, and I started washing my hands. And as I was running and washing my hands, I was crying out to God, "Oh God, please, please, please forgive me of all of my sins. In Jesus' name, amen." And then I would say it again. Please, 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 God, forgive me for all of my sins. Amen. So over and over again, I began to pray. And over the years, I started realizing that my prayer life was begging. I was begging God. And I started realizing that I felt wretched and wicked at the age of 4. And I started feeling wretched and wicked, more wicked at the age of 5, and then even more wicked at the age of 6. I never felt good enough for God. And it was such a fantastic relief the day that I realized that I did not need to become legally righteous or declared righteous or made righteous before God. And so I wrote this because this is extremely meaningful to me. The mere idea of becoming legally made righteous before God sickens me. There is absolutely no parental wisdom or love in that kind of theology. And it took me years to realize that. And this is why I think Dennis is so instrumental here, because he's young.
Sure.
And he can reach out to people in his hometown, Snake, and he can actually share this good news with people. We don't need to be legally made righteous before our Heavenly Father. Our Father is not interested in taking us to court, number one. He's not keeping a record of wrongs. He's completely kind. He's in love with us. And whatever we do wrong, he's going to do everything that he can to simply heal us and bring us some kind of resolve. Now, we might fight against that. That may be true. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have that attitude towards us. It's a very loving and compassionate way. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I know that it did take you years and years and years.
Years.
No, maybe not 4 years and years and years. But you still had to, maybe not had to, but teach it in a way. I know you know what I'm trying to say. You know, it takes a long time to get people on board. And sometimes if you just come right out and say something, they scatter, you know, like quail when you're out trying to shoot the poor things. And, you know, we've heard people say that, you know, it wasn't our righteousness. Christ put his righteousness in us. What do you say to that? You know, even forensically speaking, I know people say that we had to be righteous, but we couldn't do it. He put his righteousness in us.
See, that really makes no sense. If I read the scripture, I find that God is not imputing righteousness at all. That was actually a doctrine that was borrowed from the pagans. The Jews borrowed that doctrine from the pagans. That was part of the doctrines of Yahweh. And I guess my point is, I did not need the imputation of God's righteousness into me because God wasn't requiring me to be perfect. The whole idea of being perfect before God, or to have this God who requires perfection, is very much a part of the ideas of paganism and also the Greek culture. And this is something that the church really I can't say just lied about, but they really started majoring on that doctrine, that you have to become perfect before God.
Right. Because
they wanted to make us feel imperfect. Well, no one has to tell me that I'm not perfect. I am imperfect.
Okay, I'll stop telling you that.
Okay. But my point is, the church wanted me to feel imperfect. And the church wanted me to feel, and I wrote something else. Let me close this and pull something else up. I talked about this morning. If I make my children feel as if they can't do well without giving me credit. Let me read this again. If I make my children feel as if they can't do well without giving me, their father, credit, then how can I expect them to feel good about themselves? See, in church, it's always, if I do bad, that's me. If I do good, it's all God. And so the doctrine of imputing God's righteousness into me is something that's so harmful psychologically, because if there's anything good about me, It's because of God. It's because of God. I can't do anything good, not in and of myself. I have to say, oh, let me give all credit and honor and glory to God. If I do something good, it's all God. But when I do something that's just me, it's wretched, it's wicked. And there's something really sick about that kind of a relationship between a parent and a child. And so I'm challenging that kind of concept in theology totally. It's not founded upon what Jesus taught, nor with what Paul taught. Now, I'm not saying that some of the writers did not emphasize those kinds of maniacal things. And I'm quite certain they had family problems and they didn't know how to raise children. But I'm simply saying that I can't tell our kids, listen, every time that you give or do well in life, you attribute that to me. There's something wrong about me requiring of my children to do that. And I think that we need to become more reasonable, that is, in our theology.
Right. Today on the show, What Would Love Do? Stephen and Daryl and Tina addressed that. They reiterated your teaching from this morning, and they did a good job on encourage people to pick up on that show. What would love do?
I also made another statement. It goes like this: I don't know if religious bias is worse than family bias, but I do know that both of them lack the meaning of life. You know, one of the things that we find when we study history, religion is not what came first. Family structure did. And families would try to control the behavior of children, or possibly wives, because back in the ancient times, wives were not treated like they are today, unfortunately. I'm not suggesting that all women are treated nice today.
Right, I was going to correct you on that.
I'm simply suggesting that women need to be treated as human beings and not chattel. And so men, this is why theology is male dominant. It's because men wanted to control their children and their women. They could marry as many women as they could afford. And some would even go past that. And so, in a sense, women were slaves and also children. And in some cultures, they would actually adopt. And Paul even uses part of that usage in the book of Ephesians. They would adopt their own children and actually give them the right to actually do business for the family. But they would not do that for all children, but just some. That's quite unfortunate. But my point is, we can't go back to those models of family value systems of the Bible. The family structure, for instance, when you listen to a politician will say, we, that is Americans, we are building our nation upon the family value system of Judeo and historical Christian values. And when you analyze Judeo family values, and when you look at historical Christianity and their values, it's only here recently that women were given a right to vote, were given the right to have equal pay, things of that nature. And so we have a history that is theistic. We have a history of mistreating women. We have a history of mistreating our children. We have a history of mistreating anyone who doesn't agree with how we believe. And so my point is, family bias, and maybe we should blame this mostly on men. They wanted to control the women. They wanted to control their children, so they wrote mythology. There's really not any difference in many areas of theology. Mythology and mythology and theology are sometimes one and the same. They were simply written to control people. And the church followed suit with that. And this is the reason that they took, and there are various canons, but we'll talk about one. It's called the 66 books of the Bible. They made one canon. The reason that they did that, it's because if you read each book independently of the other books, you'll start getting the idea that these books really have very little in common with each other. But when you take all of them and squeeze them together, you will find someone interpreting Matthew based upon what Isaiah said, based upon other books. And so interpolation, eisegetical modes, become the way of life among Christians. And this is quite sad, or theists, I should say. So, I wanted to go over a few of these statements, and if you have any comments concerning any of the points that I'm making tonight, please feel free to send in your text message to 850-572-7441. Bob Graves just made a comment. He said, "O wretched theology that I have, who shall deliver me from the body of these doctrines?" Wow.
Yeah, and Lisa says, "Great teaching, Dr. Jones," and she's absolutely correct. Somebody wrote in and said, concerning your beer experience at the tender age of 6, they said, "I had a similar experience the other day. I spilled some beer, and I was crying out to God because, hey, who likes wasting beer? Am I right?"
I'll drink to that.
Beer's good.
Let's read another one. This one was simple. I said, "My friends don't unfriend me." You know, I want all of our friends to become friends with Bob and Lisa Graves. I love what Dennis did. He took all of his friends and he said, "Listen, I have some wonderful friends in the New Covenant group, and so I'm inviting all of my friends to friend Dr. Jones and his gorgeous wife."
Yeah.
And he did that. And wow. And I got to thinking of that. I said, wow, it would be nice if all of our friends would friend Dennis and friend Bob Graves and Lisa Graves and friend everyone. It would be nice for everyone to become friends. Think about how life would change. That's magnificent. Let's keep going. We're running out of time. I said, if I give my children a true sense of security, then I have succeeded at being a good father. Let me read that again. See if you agree with this, honey. If I give my children a true sense of security, then I have succeeded at being a good father. And it's in this sense of parental language that sozo exists throughout most of the New Testament. But unfortunately, the religious pew-sitter has been lured into the drama of theatrical theology, sacrifice, and salvation, and away from the meaningful experiences that a good father can give them when nurturing his children with lots of security. So it's in this sense that our English Bibles have failed to convey, So it's in this sense that our English Bibles have failed to convey how a good father wants all of his created children to feel, that is, secure. There's something about insecurity that needs to be dealt with. So many people are insecure. They feel like God is against them. This is why I want to keep teaching on the idea of Paul's usage of eirene, because Jesus became our peace. Better put, he became known as our peace because he was never against us. In other words, the whole idea of againstness theology, it needs to cease. This is why in almost every epistle of the Apostle Paul, he talks about the cessation of againstness. At one point in life, theology was God was against us, and man was against God, and they were at war in some sense of the word. And so Jesus came and made peace. That's not what he did. Jesus didn't come to make peace. He came and declared that God has never been against you. He's always been for you. He said, and I quote from the meta-language of theology here, is simply a language translation that's similar to the Greek text. He says, if God be for you, who can be against you? In fact, in Romans chapter 3, he says this. He said, if you're without faith, will God remain faithful? And Paul says, yes, he will. So those people who claim that I have to have faith in order for God to remain faithful to me, they're wrong. God remains faithful even though I may be unfaithful. That's the kind of God that we have. We have a God who will never leave us nor forsake us. He talks about a God that loves us in this context. We can't be separated from the love of God. It's so high, it's so wide, it's so deep. Who can separate us from the love of God? No one can. And so it's in that we gain security. It's the theology of love versus the theology that separates us. And so that theology of separation is the thing that damns the mind or sickens the mind. It brings us not resolve, it brings us hell. Is there a hell? There is certainly a hell in our minds. There is hell that we go through on a daily basis. But a literal hell that God created for us? No. We've created our own hell and our own doctrines of hell. And this is the thing that we need to get rid of quickly. And it's going to take people who will actually become sober-minded. And this is why we need to leave the church, because the church keeps us intoxicated with these doctrines. And we're so intoxicated that we can't think straight.
I think that the love of God blows away the fear of hell, like a ventilator to a fire, something like that. So, yeah.
Good point, Dennis.
Yeah.
Let me read one more. I said, all of God's created children can look at the same thing and be inspired to write differently. I want to make a statement about this because next week we're going to have Alan Darley. He's a wonderful individual. He's from the UK, and he's going to have his own show. And I think the name of his show is going to be called Good Reasons to Believe. Now, he's going to come and present his ideas concerning 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15 and 16 next week on our show. And this is going to be very much a theological discussion. And I want him to be able to have the time to present what he thinks to be true. But I want to read this and read it slowly. All of God's created children can look at the same thing and be inspired to write differently. I hope people are listening to this. We can look at the same thing. We're not all inspired the same way. And let me see if I can state it this way. So many times we claim that the writers of the Bible were inspired by God himself. I'm convinced that the writers of the Bible, for the most part, were inspired by what God created. There's a difference between being inspired directly from God and being inspired by what you perceive to be true. And so when we look at the Old Testament, the various stories, these stories represent man's perception of God. And so it's basically the good and the bad and the ugly of the concepts of man. And it comes out of the morass of their experiences. And simply because they were experiencing the bad for the most part, we have a pitiful theology. This is why I want this to be read tonight. All of God's created children can look at the same thing and be inspired to write differently. But in a very strange way, inspiration seems to come in various forms from everything that is evolving. Everything is changing. Not just things, but people are. So maybe we should consider how people and things are evolving before we start invoking God as the direct source of our writings. Then I put P.S. My writings are inspired, but not holy. I refuse to make a sacred cow out of anything. So this is one of the reasons that I have not wanted to present what I have translated to the public yet, because I want to do enough prep work so people will not treat what I have translated as a sacred cow. I'm tired of these sacred cows in which we have, I now have an authority. Dr. Jones translated this. I'm going to present only a working model that needs to be in juxtaposition with other working models. I'm not claiming to be perfect. I'm perfectly happy being imperfect and in the improving state with your help. I'm thankful for that, baby.
Right.
And so, my writings are inspired, but not holy. I refuse to make a sacred cow out of anything. Then I put another P.S. with another S after it. And I said, if we are honest about what and who inspires us, then we might understand why our conclusions are shaped a certain way. In other words, if we can say to ourselves, and sometimes it's good to speak to yourself, sometimes that's considered to be a sign of insanity. But sometimes it's good for us to think about things like this. We need to consider what inspires us and who inspires us. In a sense, we're all like Pavlovian dogs. We're all hearing bells. We're all hearing different things from time to time, and we're conditioned. And so if we happen to have a chance to get a breath of fresh air and get beyond the ringing of, Pavlov ringing that bell, that might be, like salvation to us. And so it's in this sense that we need to start thinking about the what and the who that might be inspiring us. And so please understand, we have many writers on the market today. And one of the things that I discourage much in every way is to read the writings of people who are claiming, thus saith the Lord thy God. In other words, God spoke directly to me and you listen to me because I am the authority. You don't need to go any further. That's nonsense. We need to listen to people who say, I had a subjective experience, possibly with God. And this is the way that I perceive God to be, but it may not be totally accurate. And so I'm going to write what I think to be true, and then I may translate what I think to be true concerning the ancients, or even possibly a modern or two. And so it's in that kind of context that we can find some sense of sanity in this world that we live in called theology.
So you can get inspiration from many people.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we all get inspiration from all kinds of people. I find my inspiration comes from you, but I can't say that you're totally God, but I can certainly say that you are God. You're gorgeous.
Okay.
You're smart.
Moving on.
Moving on. And so
Moving on.
I have my bragging points. I
Well-
have my bragging rights. I have a right to brag. I mean, I stand in awe. I worship you, honey.
I love you so much.
Well, I love you.
All right, I wanted to say something concerning probably the wisest woman that I know, Tina Furlow. She says, religion and much theology will fail us, but God's love never fails. And yes, and she also says we appreciate your writings. And I do know you, I know you share your translation with me if I'm going to be teaching a ladies group or this or that, you're kind enough to let me to have it, because I'm not going to make it into sacred cow. I'm going to keep you grounded. Keep you real.
Okay, you're going to keep everyone from making it into a sacred cow. And that's good.
No.
Because we don't need another sacred cow. I mean, think about how many things that we have as sacred cows. Religion, the Bible, the government. Washington, D.C. is a sacred cow. All of our politicians claim, when I go to Washington, I'm going to change the entire paradigm. I mean, come on.
I think it's fine if they do,
I'd love for it to be changed.
but usually they become changed
Right.
for
Yeah,
the worse.
that's true.
Sad
That's
to
true.
say.
You were going to make another point.
No, that was from Tina. Dennis, do you have anything to add concerning sacred cows?
Well, blow them up.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just want to say that the teaching of John's very great. It's like a ventilator that blows away all bad theology, and that's just good. And I just say keep it going, and I hope that people will not get shocked or offended, but that there will be that just will be like a fresh wind of some ventilator that blows just through their air and just to their minds, that they get sober again and try to think for themselves, but then not like a dogma that or something, but just the freedom, even if they don't on one line with love on this moment or never will be, it's okay, they're still good enough, and that's a great message, I think. And but just put out all the Christianity stuff in a way that it doesn't become churchy, but just become that I talk to a person and not, oh, you go to church, so you are, just when you talk to your friends, when your family, basic way, that will be wonderful. Yeah.
It reminds me of in job cost accounting, there's a term, it's an acronym. It's called WIP, and it means work in progress, and you have to account for that and charge out for it. But I think that's the way we all are. We're just all a work in progress, and I don't know. Some of us are further along, and some of us maybe have just started out. And so it's good to see Dennis so young to be so far along.
I agree. I wanted to read one more, and this is for the sake of various kinds of theists and even atheists. And I'm so thankful. We are so thankful to have Greg Bray and other atheists coming our way. We want them to feel so good and so loved here at the New Covenant Group. Now, I'm going to do a teaching on this in a few weeks, and I want you to listen to this. In fact, Joey may need to write some of this down. I don't know. He's standing in the back looking in the control room. But I wrote, I can be a theist without believing in God. I can be a theist without even believing that God exists. For theology today is broad enough to embrace the subjective and the objective. Theology has always been a model of discovery, but unfortunately the church distracted this notion for a revelation-only position. See, it was the church that came along and said, everything's a revelation of God. And I find that through the ancient writings, those people, they labeled all kinds of people as theists. A man could sculpture something, and they would call him a theist. He was creating his own God. They didn't mean God Almighty. They just meant, yeah, he's a theist. Man could venture into the idea of thinking, writing philosophy or contemplating the idea of science or philosophy, and they could simply say, well, let's look at the subjective, let's look at the objective, let's deal with logic a little bit, and let's do this. And people would say, oh, you're a certain kind of theist. And so I find that back in the ancient days, theology was quite wide. It was very inclusive. I could say, At one point in time, it was all inclusive. But unfortunately, today, theists are like this. They have goggles on. And I'm afraid that atheists have taken the same position. And we need to take the things away from our eyes that cloud our judgment. Theology is not a system by which it says God exists or that we need to believe in him. Now, some positions in theology suggest that, not all. And so let's discover all of theology before we make conclusions. And so I'm going to treat that in a few days.
Another
And
time. Yeah.
yeah, but
That'd
not
be
tonight. It's
interesting.
already 10 o'clock.
Yeah, well, I want to say this. It's from Stephen. He said sometimes our families become our sacred cows as well, and that is so intuitive because that's probably I don't want to say our last line of defense, but that is something that we will fight for and stick up for. And I know the older I get, the more I understand that my mom and dad aren't perfect. They didn't do everything. They did what they could, and God knows I'd still defend them. But they didn't give me all truth. They gave me what they thought was the truth. And as soon as we realize that and say, I can step beyond mom and dad, and so Stephen's right on the button there. Very good. And another young person just blowing it out of the ballpark tonight.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And he
Okay.
has red hair, so that makes it extra special.
That's even better. So, I guess
Dennis,
that's it.
we thank you so much for being on our show tonight. You have been marvelous, wonderful.
I left it.
Okay, we have a visitor.
I know.
I need to take a moment before our show is over to congratulate our new triple phrase speaker champion, Dennis. He succeeded in slipping the word ventilator into his conversation 3 times without arousing suspicion.
Good job, Dennis.
Ventilator.
And I have to also recognize my wife once again, Monica, who is our reigning triple phrase awareness champion. She caught it all 3 times and announced it as soon as the deed was done.
What is the prize?
Very good.
The title is the prize.
And she also defended you tonight. Your honor.
I think she defended herself, but she has every right. Yeah. All right, that's all I wanted to say. Congratulations, Dennis and Monica.
Thank you.
Good job, Daniel Squirrels.
Hey, we love you guys, and it's been a wonderful time being together.
Really enjoyed your linguistic insight and all the fancy schmancy words you used, and I always learn. Didn't think after all these years I could learn anything more from you, but I did tonight.
I love you very much.
Love you too.
Thank you guys for your time. We'll see you next week.
Next week.